Welcome to the Auto Guide Show. This week we drive a convertible, a dad car, a super fancy car, and a hybrid, and then we speak to a winner of the 24-hour Nurburgring race. But first, a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Okay, so to start things out, it's just about summer, so fitting time to talk about a convertible. Kyle, you drove the new Mustang without a roof.
Yes, yeah, and I drove it really briefly on the launch last year, but this was an opportunity to live with it for a week, and it turns out despite the stinger at the beginning of this episode, this is not actually the dad car we're talking about, but it is a pretty good dad car, right? I mean, except that most dads will probably want the V8, but I will say that the EcoBoost it's a totally fine vehicle for most people's needs. If people want a stylish convertible, one that I guess technically will seat 4 in a pinch. The EcoBoost is a good one. Just please don't spec the active exhaust.
Did you get the manual or the auto in that?
Auto only now for the EcoBoost. Okay. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's gone. If you want manual, it's V8 only, which I suppose makes sense, but it's a little sad, right? Like I imagine there's got to be some people out there who want a fun sporty Mustang, but just don't want the V8, but they wanted a manual. But I guess that probably was a very small percentage of buyers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess Ford looked at what the take rate was for the EcoBoost manual combined with the cost to keep that transmission around for the new gen, and it just didn't make sense, I guess. But that engine pairs up pretty well with the auto, from what I remember, especially because it's boosted. It doesn't really catch itself out, which is nice.
Yeah, it's good. The only thing I would say, and this probably is a weird complaint, is it has too many gears. And so it almost feels like a CVT when you're driving it around town because it's constantly keeping it in the sweet spot, but it means that and the shifts are fast, but it means that everything kind of blurs together. And with that active exhaust, it's just kind of drony. It's not, I don't expect a 4-cylinder to sound fantastic. There are some that sound nice on the market. This isn't one of them. But you know what? Again, I'm okay with it. And like I said in the headline there, in a weird way, this is probably the most true to historic Mustang you can buy because it's stylish. It's reasonably quick, but not super quick. And it's fairly affordable. There's not a lot of convertibles that undercut it.
Yeah, convertible is definitely a dying segment.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so moving on. It's a review I did. So we have covered the Kona quite a bit. We did the Kona first drive, the Kona electric first drive. We had it in our comparison. But there is one we have never got here in North America, and that's the hybrid. So for this new generation, there's still a hybrid again, but it's only overseas. So while I was in Germany, I got to drive one and see what it was like and if it should be here. So for starters, they get different options over there. So I can't really talk about how it was equipped because ours had heated and ventilated seats in the front, heated seats in the rear. The passenger seat had a recline mode. The driver's seat had a recline mode. Yeah, like the one on the Ioniq 5, where you push a button and I don't know why the driver has one. And maybe when you're taking the channel, so you can have a little nap in your car.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe that's his point. But so the hybrid is it's using the 1.6 engine without turbos and an electric motor paired to it. So that's a hybrid combo we don't have in North America either. So that's part of it.
It might be similar to the Elantris. Maybe.
Yeah, that's maybe where it's gonna. Oh yeah, that's probably where it's gonna be. Do you know how much power the Elantra makes?
130 something.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'm wrong. That is the same powertrain.
Sorry, but
yeah,
it's interesting because it's a really good one in the Elantra. So how is it here?
Yeah, well, driving. It's smooth. It's not overly loud, which is nice. On the Autobahn, it would get the Kona to 173 kilometers an hour before it was done. Like you said, it's 139 horsepower, torque those up at like 195, which is the same as the 1.6 turbo. The thing is, in Europe, it's priced at least at the end line in some countries or higher. So it's like a premium. So it would only make sense, I think, in North America if it replaced the 2-liter and that was your entry engine, and then you could get the turbo higher up. Because the other more glaring, I guess, issue is it's only front wheel drive. So it probably is the entire Elantra drivetrain, just put it in. So California, great. Florida, great. Colorado, not so great. So that may be part of the reason why it doesn't make it up here. But the EV's front wheel drive only too, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're selling that. But again, I guess that's different. But if they could make it the entry level engine and somehow make it an all wheel drive option, maybe put a little motor in the back wheels or something, then it'd be really appealing. But as it is, it's still a good car to drive. It's just a straight transplant I don't think would work right now. They need to decontent it and figure, I don't know, maybe if you ramp up production, you can get the cost down to put it in the more normal Konas.
Yeah, but either way, it's interesting. It's good to know what it's like elsewhere in the world.
And it was easy to take pictures of because it's really pretty there. All right, and moving on to your actual ultimate dad car.
Yes, the 2024 Toyota Camry TRD. And we've talked about it briefly before because we did a review on it back in the winter. And we just wanted to revisit it because Father's Day. And when everyone listens to this, Father's Day will have been just passed. But it really made us think that this is, kind of the last of a dying breed. It's the last mainstream, naturally aspirated V6 sedan. And that kind of does make it a dad car. It's fun, but it's reasonably priced. It's practical, but not too practical. Like, you tell someone, oh, I drive a Camry. No one is ever going to suspect anything unusual. They're like, oh, he's very pragmatic. He picked something that's very to the point, no frills, and then they see it and that silly wing. It's like, oh, okay, no, there's actually some frills, but it's a good time.
And that body kit. Yeah, I mean, people, younger listeners and viewers, they probably don't really get what we're referencing, but from like I'd say the mid 80s to the mid 2000s, there's a good 20-year at least period where if you were a sporty dad and didn't want a minivan and then later SUV, you would go get a sedan, a 4-door sedan, and you'd upgrade to the big V6. And that was like a whole line of them. Like, we had Grand Prix GTPs, and we had Chevy SSs, and the Altima Nismo at one point. So yeah.
Yeah,
it was like a thing.
Yeah, and they just don't really exist anymore. Like, the Charger is out of production. I mean, the new one will come, but it's a much different proposition. Like, this is pretty cheap. It's $35,000 US or just over 40 Canadian. There's not a lot that you can get with 300 horsepower these days that has that.
True. All right, moving on back to a car I drove. Well, not a car, an SUV, and it was the Range Rover SV. So for those unfamiliar with the Range Rover line, the SV is a new trim that's like an absolute over-the-top version. And in my review, I talk about the reasoning, I believe, is because Range Rover, when I grew up until probably 5-10 years ago, if you wanted the fancy SUV, you got a Range Rover or a Mercedes G-Wagon. Those are your choices. And if you needed space, you're getting the Range Rover. And that was like the status symbol. But as we all know, everybody loves SUVs. So now there's a Rolls-Royce SUV and a Bentley and an Aston Martin. There's going to be a Ferrari. There already is a Lamborghini. So it's not the choice by default anymore. And those were kind of outpricing it with ridiculous features and options. So Range Rover said they can play that game. And this is a $240,000 really a 4-seat SUV. I mean, 5 technically, but no one's sitting in the middle. That's just, over the top. It's got screens for the rear passengers. The right rear seat does recline mode where the front seat folds into the dash. It gives you like a nice lazy boy style sitting position. Everything's power. The cargo covers power. The center armrest in the rear powers down by power. The cup holders open by power. It's just everything Range Rover could find stuffed into a car.
It sounds like it's a car meant to be chauffeured. So, of course, my first question is, how did the family like it?
Oh, well, my son spent the entire week, every time he got in, he hit the recline button. You have an 8-year-old just lounging in the back. I'm like, you don't really need that. Unless my wife was in, then he couldn't do that because he squish her up against the dashboard, which it won't let you do if someone's in. It has seat sensors.
Well, that's good.
But that's the thing. Like, it obviously doesn't handle great. It's got 285 tires all around, but it's like 6,000 pounds, and it's still a Range Rover, so it's designed to be able to do off-roading. I mean, this one you're going to be a little more limited due to your wheel and tire combo, but it can, wade. It's got the air suspension that can lift it like over 11 inches in the air. So it does all that. So yeah, it can't also have amazing handling, but it has the BMW 4.4 liter engine, which in the Range Rover and even the SV last year was making the 538, what is in the X6 and X5 M60, but this year it's making 606. So it's got the M power basically, but it's funny because like in those SUVs it makes a little bit more, like 7 or 8 more horsepower. So it's like BMW said, you can have our engine, but you're not getting quite the full power. We're gonna turn you down a bit, but it's kind of fun to drive. So yeah, how you said chauffeur, I kind of see it as one that, not to be too cliche, but celebrities, athletes, CEOs or high ranking people, I think a lot will buy it because they can drive it around when they need to, around town here and there to events. But when they need to go to whatever, they can have their driver drive them and also be comfortable. So it's a very limited model, but it's good for Range Rover to, take on those big guys head on.
Yeah.
And our final feature, it's just sort of my wrap up from all of this Nurburgring Germany stuff. So I was just talking about Hyundai and how serious their N division is. Some people that are maybe passively following cars or don't really look into it may think it's just like, oh, they have a fancy name for a car that makes more power. It's way more than that. As I said, I've toured the facility. It's also, you can see how determined they are because everything they enter, they pretty much dominate. So they entered World Rally and they won a bunch of constructor championships. And this year, I believe they're in the lead for that. And I think their driver's in second. I can't remember what happened last race. In TCR, in IMSA, they keep winning. They've won the Nurburgring. I think this was their 4th year in a row. And they were really good in eTCR until it folded because they were like the only manufacturer that had factory support. And now they're making that Pikes Peak vehicle to, again, win its class, not outright, but who knows where they go next. So yeah, it was interesting to see. And even just like the setup of where we stayed and all the support, like this isn't even Hyundai's team at the Nürburgring because TCR, you can't be a factory team officially. So it's Brian Herta's team and they're just letting support. And they're not the only one who does that, but it's just crazy to see the setup. Like they really are going for it. And in a couple of years, I don't see why people won't think of them as some of the more luxury brands like BMW and whatnot, not on the same plane, but the same seriousness. Like Honda, they have Type R, so it's not like a group of people.
But no, you make an excellent point, and I think a good comparison would be Toyota, right? Like when Gazoo Racing started doing stuff, I want to say with the LFA about a decade ago, it was a pretty niche offering, but it was very consistent, and they put in the work at the Nürburgring, and now GR is a pretty respected sporty sub brand, right? And it's nice. The smart thing here with Hyundai is they're not doing the big cost ones like dedicated motorsport like F1 or Formula E. They're doing production-based ones, which not only is, I imagine, a lot easier on the budget, but also people can see it and say like, oh, hey, I can buy a car that is related to that. So yeah, it's great to watch, and I can't wait to see what next year holds.
Yeah, a lot of the parts, not a lot, but some parts, they race at the Nürburgring and then it gets carried over to their end cars. And they started by not even having really a team. They're just trying parts on a car, and then it kind of evolved. But it's sort of like, I guess, Ford's SVO back in the day. And then it turned into SVT, but it's all the same thing. So, All right. We will be stepping away for a second. It is time for another Project Genesis Coupe update. And then we'll be back to talk about the news of the week. eBay Motors is here for the ride. With the parts you need at the prices you want, and with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, they're guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Welcome to another update on Project Genesis Coupe, and this week I am not doing any upgrades, I'm not fixing anything, and I'm not worrying about any of the electronics or thrown codes. Instead, what we're going to do is clean the car. It's probably the number one thing people do with their car besides drive it. So eBay Motors is full of a lot of fantastic choices. I have chosen 2 Chemical Guys products that I'll use just to give it a nice clean, as the car's not too dirty, but needs to kind of be shined up a little bit. So let's see what Okay, first up we got this. It is called Mr. Pink Foam Party Wash and Wax. It's your standard car wash soap that's designed to protect the paint and make it shine and get rid of debris. This is one of Chemical Guys' newest formulas. It says to put about 1 to 2 ounces of soap per 4 gallons of water, so I'll mix that up in a second. It's important for all you listening and watching to use proper car wash soap. Say no to dish soap or general cleaners. They will eat into your clear coat and potentially ruin your paint. Buy something that's meant for your car and it will last a lot longer in a nice shiny condition. So once I'm done washing the car, we are going to use this product called the Thirst Trap. It is again something new from the Chemical Guys. It's a combo microfiber towel and a chamois. So it's designed that it can dry your car when it's wet, like a chamois does, or if there's just some dust you want to get off, it can also just be used to brush that dust off. I won't be using it as the duster today, I'll be using it as a chamois. In a future update, hopefully I can use it as a duster and see how it works there too. But for now, I need to get washing the car, so let's get at it. All right, let's mix up the solution. It says shake well before using. I've shaken it well. Pour some in. Oh yeah, it's pink. It's definitely pink. All right, let's add the water and get washing on this car. Of course, I'm using a wash mitt to wash my car. It's one of the better ways to wash a car without worrying about scratching the paint. Although the Mr. Pink foam wash went into the bucket pink, it is just your regular sort of white color when foamed up. It has low to medium amount of suds. There's enough that you can see where you've wiped on the car, but there's not so much that your bucket's all suds or that it takes a lot to wash it off. The dirt and grime that was on my car came off with it. So I'm pretty happy with how that looks. Now it's time to dry it off with the Thirst Trap. So I've got to say, this is actually a lot bigger than I was expecting. It is more, I guess, chamois sized as opposed to microfiber. It feels like a microfiber, but let's see how much water it actually absorbs. All right, thoughts on the Thirst Trap? At first, it wasn't drying quite as well as a regular chamois would. It was leaving a little more surface water, but as it got more water in it, it seemed to do a better job. Regardless, there's no water spots anywhere where I washed it. And this thing holds so much water. I dried my entire car without wringing it out once. And even if I try to now, I don't know if I'm gonna get any water out of it. Let's give it a shot. Nope. So yeah, this is a pretty good product. So yeah, no new parts, no big upgrades, but you know what? Cleaning your car is very important. The little bit of money you spend now could save you a lot in the long run by protecting your car's clear coat and paint. Plus, if you're like me and you've put some new parts on, you probably want to keep them clean and shiny as long as possible. So if you take pride in your car, buy the right quality products, shine it up, and enjoy it as long as you can. Okay, welcome back. So let's get into the news of the week. And the biggest story, I guess, from a sort of an impact on people is IHS tested large body-on-frame SUVs. It's a segment they haven't tested before, they claim. And they got a Wagoneer, an Expedition, and a Tahoe. And they did their moderate overlap test, their really narrow one, and side impact. And they found, and then all their headlight and pedestrian like avoidance stuff. But on the actual crash, they found the segment's not that great. All 3 of them on both the small overlap and the moderate overlap, the rear seat passengers are getting flung around too much. And they're saying it could cause injuries. And then on the small overlap, the Expedition, the barrier got into the driving area, it pushed the frame back enough. So yeah, there's some things there. The Wagoneer did really good. And then on the pedestrian avoidance and headlights, the Tahoe at night had trouble because they ranked their headlights poor, so it also didn't see pedestrians in time for the crash avoidance. So it's one of those. I mean, they highlighted some things, and I'm sure all these would be addressed in the next couple of years. But it's interesting right now because there's that myth of I drive a big SUV, I'm the safest. Well, it's not always true.
No, because physics kind of can't be changed. You're driving a huge, huge, heavy vehicle, and suddenly it stops, and there's going to be a lot of kinetic energy that has to go somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, if you're hitting another car, which is sort of the argument people make, yeah, obviously you're going to push them more. But if you hit an immovable object, like you said, you got 7,000 pounds, 6,000 pounds to stop as opposed to 3 or 4. So, yeah. So moving on, GM put out a release that they're pushing back the St. Catharines engine plan. So they're making the V8s and the dual clutch transmissions for the Corvette, and that was going to be moved stateside. And in Canada, that plant was going to produce, I think they wanted 400,000 EV powertrains, but they've now pushed that timeline back. And I think it's a reflection of pretty much every manufacturer that's kind of realizing the great EV push and switch isn't happening as fast as they were told it was going to, basically by regulators. And since regulators are kind of stepping back, they're stepping back.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that major a decision. It's not as bad as a few weeks ago when Ford pushed back that whole changeover of an entire plant because that one will be idling. This is a fairly specialized plant currently, and it makes, like you said, the Corvette powertrain, and that's a pretty popular vehicle, but it is still niche. So I imagine, yeah, this is fine. If they see demand change in a year or two, I'm sure they can adjust again. But yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and it's different than in the past because that engine is Corvette only. I mean, back with the LS and even the early LTs, like before that, they'd be in Camaros or Firebirds even, and there's more production for them. But yeah, I kind of get the impression like, well, we're not ready for this, so let's just push it back. But maybe they'll make a new plan. Maybe it'll still happen. We'll see.
Yeah.
So some good news and bad news for enthusiasts. The Golf R, the new one that's coming out, that's been kind of teased by Volkswagen, it's going to get a power increase. So it should make 329 horsepower, which, I mean, I'm all for more power. So great. I think that's 14 more than now. There may not be a manual, though, which we've already been told with the GTI. So it would make sense. I don't see them making a manual just for the R.
Well, and only for North America, because the R and the GTI were dual clutch only in Europe. So we were already, that was living on borrowed time. It's still sad because a manual GTI is fun. I haven't driven the R, but I assume it's pretty much the same idea. It's fun.
Yeah, that transmission, I'm sure, was, hey, it still fits. Let's keep selling it. Now with the new one, I mean, it probably still fits, but they probably, yeah, like you said, it was on borrowed time and now it's past its ability. Because both the GTI, like the GTI is a serious power increase, and this has a little bit more. So, yeah. And speaking of power increases, the M2 gets a little bump for next year. It's like 473, I think now. It's up 20 horsepower. So, I mean, you're never going to notice it if you drive a 4 to a 5 back to back. Maybe if you have stopwatches and, onboard timing, you'll see a marginal increase, but it's for bragging rights.
Having driven it last year in both forms, manual and the automatic, the last thing I would have said the M2 needed was more power.
Yeah.
So how about we take some weight out? I'm sorry, BMW. Like it. Also, where are the good colors? Please tell me there are more fun colors because the M2 has excellent colors.
That is another big change. I think it has like 14 colors or something. So yes,
excellent.
It does get fun colors. So you're gonna have fun colors and a bit more power. I mean, it's funny. That's for turbo engines. That always seems like the easy. Hey, can we like keep our reliability and just increase a little bit so it sounds more powerful? So they did.
I guess this made sense because the new M3 and M4 for 25 gain a little bit more power with their all-wheel drive models. And so the base model is still 473, which this now matches, but there's more of a mental gap between those two now. So it's like, well, give it more power. Why not? It's the same engine.
Yeah, and as inconsequential as it may sound, it's better for BMW because, the 453 and the 473 are coming off the same assembly line, but they're still going to have different codes at the factory. They still have to have the right software as opposed to the raw. And where now they could just, push them all out and not worry about it.
Yeah.
So it's actually a cost savings to make the M2 faster. So yay.
That's the best way to sell it.
Mm-hmm. Now, Toyota, if you want to grab that engine for a Super Supra, I don't know what you call it, Supra RZ. Well, that was only in Japan.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's it for news. I didn't have much today. We are now going to have a very special guest. We are going to talk to Mark Wilkins, who is a winner at the Nurburgring 24 race that just happened a couple weeks ago. So this is the Auto Guide Show brought to you by eBay Motors, and we'll be right back to talk to him in a couple minutes. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Okay, everyone, let's take a minute and talk about the one that got away. The vehicle you once owned and for whatever reason had to get rid of, and to this day fully regret ever doing so. For me, it's my Subaru SVX. It was a 1997 model, which was one of the last years it was ever sold here. It was black on the outside and it had the beige leather and suede interior. It was in amazing condition for its age because it was just a one-owner vehicle. The interior was near flawless. The paint was pretty good considering it was about a 20-year-old car when I got it. I just loved everything about it. I loved the quirkiness because I love oddball cars. I love the window within the window, the power button on the gear shifter, the way the dash was laid out and you could hide the radio behind the fake wood panel. The flat six was just so smooth and it was all-wheel drive, and although it wasn't overly quick, it still had enough power. The problem was, within a year of buying that car, I ended up selling it because I got a great deal on another vehicle. And to this day, I regret doing so. Part of the reason I sold it was, although it was in great shape, it wasn't perfect and there were things that needed to be fixed, like the air conditioner, reservoir, some bearings, and other bits. And back then there was no eBay guaranteed fit program, so finding parts for such a rare 20-year-old car was not easy. Luckily, I sold it to someone who not only cared for it, but took the time to fix it up, and every once in a while I do get to still see it, and I still regret ever getting rid of it. I am constantly online looking for a new SVX because now I have a system that I can find parts for it, but I haven't come across one that's both in the right condition and the right price range. With over 122 million parts, you can make sure your number one ride or die stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. All right, welcome back. We have a very special guest this week, someone I met a couple weeks ago. Mark, if you could introduce yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Mark Wilkins. I'm a professional race car driver with Hyundai, driver of the number 98 Elantra NTCR in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge, and most recently driver at the Nurburgring for Hyundai Motorsport.
That's great. Yeah, as I've said on this podcast a couple times, I was there at that race, so we'll get into that in a bit. I think the first question a lot of people have when they talk to someone who's racing professionally is, how did you get your start?
Yeah, so my start was a little while ago, back in the late 90s in karting. And then from karting sort of into open wheel racing. I did the Jim Russell School up at Mont Tremblant and the Bridgestone School at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. And that's sort of like that early education that I got in racing. And then I ran the Canadian Formula Ford Championship for a year and then moved stateside to 2-liter Formula Renault and then ultimately Star Mazda. Before switching to prototypes and joined the Grand Am series and raced Daytona prototypes for a number of years before sort of getting picked up by a manufacturer to run production cars. And then I've been racing production cars for the better part of the last decade.
Oh, very cool. A lot of those series bring back memories. I remember going to Mosport and camping out and watching them. I forgot that I did that Bridgestone School once too. And man, that was tough enough. I can't imagine more powerful, faster vehicles. So you mentioned, sorry, Kyle, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say for any American listeners, Mont Tremblant does not get enough attention as a fantastic track. And I just want to hear Mark's thoughts on that for just a sec.
Yeah, I feel really fortunate to have had the opportunity to race there. And I've raced there in a few different cars, Formula Renault, and obviously the 1600 cars in the early days. But you're absolutely right. It's a brilliant racetrack in a brilliant part of the country. And yeah, it's been a long time since I've driven there, but fond memories, even going back to my dad's racing days, way back in the mid 90s. I just love going there. Always a great show. Great fans and support for racing in that area. And yeah, I just wish we could go back.
Well,
Yeah,
I guess we're just... Oh. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, I don't think there's any region in Canada with more passionate race fans than Quebec. So I can imagine what it's like racing there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So Mark, you mentioned that you started driving production cars. Was that with Hyundai from the beginning? And so if so, like, can you walk us through, the timeline there? And did you find success pretty quickly with production cars?
Sure. So yeah, production car racing for me started in 2012 with the Hyundai Motor Group. We actually raced in the Pirelli World Challenge in the Kia. And I ran a number of years in that car, in the Optima. And we had a lot of success there. And then I switched to running with Honda for a season in GT3 racing and development of the Acura NSX. And then I joined Hyundai in 2018. And we started with the i30N in Pirelli World Challenge first season. We had a lot of success. We won a lot of races. I think we won the first 2 races of that season. And I remember joining the program and working with Gabriele Tarquini. And he said, this is a brilliant car. This is going to be a very successful race car. There was a ton of development done. It was, the early days of the N brand. And we had a really fantastic start to the program way back when 2018, it's hard to believe, before switching gears to IMSA in 2019 and the Veloster N TCR, which was also a brilliant car and shared a lot of similarities to the i30N. But of course, we got to experience the Veloster N here as the first N road car in North America. And it was just really fun to sort of showcase that while racing that car in IMSA and winning races there. And ultimately, that was a championship winning season for Michael Lewis and I. And for Hyundai, we've kind of just kept that really rolling straight through the better part of the last 5 years in IMSA competition. And we switched cars. So we're running the Elantra NTCR. We have been now for a couple of years with, the same success. Obviously a slightly different platform, bigger car, but equally as race winning pedigree and just a fantastic product for us to race. So yeah, it's been really successful, even to, this past weekend in Mid-Ohio, one of our team cars won the race. So, it's been coming off of a 24-hour win at Nurburgring, which we'll get to a little bit. But even in Mid-Ohio a week after, the car's winning globally and just showing just how awesome it is at every level.
All right. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned those Optimas. I remember those, and they were such giant killers because they were like taking down all these rear-wheel drive sports cars. Those are good times. So you obviously have had quite the history in powerful front-wheel drive cars. What's the biggest challenge or difference than, say you're driving a Mustang or a GT3 or a prototype?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, you're obviously doing everything with the front wheels. So, you're asking a lot, that we have a lot of power in these TCR cars, sort of in around 350 horsepower. And so we have great tires with the Michelins, put the power down well. We have really good differentials. Front wheel drive cars really are not like the front wheel drive cars of old. They handle incredibly well. And just not to get, oh, did I lose you there?
No, we still have you.
Hold on, I lost you on the screen here. That's bizarre. Here we go. We're back. So front wheel drive cars, of old were notorious for understeer balance, and these days it's just not true. At Mid-Ohio, we had I think we qualified in the top 12 overall. And so that's going against all the GT4 cars. And just the way in which the cars are balanced now, the way they put the power down is just incredible. And so how do you drive them differently? Obviously, you need good entry rotation, but not too much so that you get entry oversteer balance. But you want sort of like a zero steer where you effectively initiate the steering input, hold the wheel straight, let the rear rotate, and then go back to throttle. And the differential just really works magic. So we're able to get off the corner well. We're able to manage the tires well and have very consistent pace. And at Mid-Ohio, I think we almost had 0 tire degradation. And I double stinted tires in the race, which we normally wouldn't do, but the wear was so low. So yeah, I mean, front wheel drive cars are just epically fun to drive. They give you so much confidence and there's so much grip, and the balance of these latest front wheel drive cars is really quite something.
Yeah, I obviously I don't have experience with the race car, but when we did Sonoma years ago with the Ns for the launch of the Elantra and the Kona N, it is incredible how unfront drive the Elantra N is when you're chucking it around in autocross.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, you can really do anything with the cars, and you get tire temperature really quickly. So like you would have noticed, the rear moves around a lot early when you go out of the pits until you get temperature in the rear tires. And then, the balance is just brilliant. And it's just so much fun. Everyone thinks, well, there's no way a front wheel drive car is going to oversteer. Well, no, they do. They rotate very well. And it requires a little bit to take long. What you want.
Uh-oh. Might have lost him.
Uh-oh.
Still there?
Oh.
And almost.
We got
there. All right.
Yeah.
You're back.
Yeah. We got a weird surge there. It just glitched out. It couldn't handle the the connection just couldn't handle the description of how the cars are. So Mark, I'm gonna change gears a little bit because of course, we're here to talk to you about the Nurburgring 24-hour race that you two were there for. So I was following along, and to say that it didn't go as planned is a little bit of an underestimation, but or an understatement. But does it feel great to say that you're a winner of the Nurburgring 24-hour?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it was a very different Nurburgring 24-hour. I mean, it was maybe more like a 7.5 hour. Unfortunately, yeah, the weather and the fog, which is very typical of Nurburgring. I mean, this is not the first time they've had really interesting weather. They've had snow, they've had fog, rain, you name it, they've had it. And this year was really no exception. We were, I think, spending a great deal of time looking at the weather, and every forecast was different. And we thought, well, it might be okay, it might be dry. And then obviously the fog rolled in, and that was that. But it feels amazing. I mean, it's just very hard to describe. It's really surreal feeling driving there because there's really no circuit in the world like the Nürburgring, especially in the Nordschleife. It's very challenging. It's daunting. It's super fast and very unforgiving. And so going in there, the goal was obviously to get a 1, 2, 3 for Hyundai, but the challenge of just dealing with all the elements, all the variables is very high. And so, we started the race wet. It sort of dried out, but it only dried out really on the main line. And then, my co-driver drove into the fog and he said he really couldn't see anything. There's just so much going on there that it really takes a lot of your mental capacity just to process everything. And I think a lot of that is just, there's really no part of the track you can rest. It's, even the sections that are relatively straight, they put a bend in the road, and you don't need to go through the bend. You can kind of straight shoot it, but you sort of wonder what they were thinking when they built it. I mean, they really built it to be incredibly challenging. And I think that's why it's such a famous, unbelievable circuit. And so, yeah, it was a surreal experience. To come away with a win obviously feels great. But just the overall experience of having the opportunity to do it was really special.
Yeah. Having been there and watching it in person, it really is a race of attrition. And with the weather we had this year, even that very first lap, it was a gamble what tires, and not half, but a lot of the field dove into the pit lane instead of taking the green flag because they needed to get on to groove tires or full wets. And seemed to be a challenge. I mean, how you said you got 1, 2, 3, it wasn't without incidents. I know one of the other cars on your team had to get a repair done, and you had to guess the right tires. Right before the fog rolled in, we were in your pit watching a pit change, and they put slicks on the front and grooved on the rear, which I thought was pretty cool, just to keep the rear, I guess, from dancing around as much. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things they always say is you always have to look at the corner workers. So the corner workers tell the whole story, and they have, over 100 corner workers around the track, keeping everybody in line. And the one thing they'll do when it's raining, and of course, because the track is 20 plus kilometers long, it can be wet in some parts and dry in other parts. And so the marshals will point to the sky, and they give you like a point up to the sky to show that next flag station, or just a little bit down the road, it could be a downpour. And so you'll be on slicks, you'll be flat out, and then all of a sudden, you're in extremely treacherous conditions. And we talked to our teammates who have a lot of experience. They're running around in the wet. And I think they mentioned there's about 12 different asphalt changes. So they repave, I think it's 3 kilometers a year, approximately, of track surface. And so that new asphalt is pretty grippy. The old asphalt has no grip. And a lot of places where they separate the new from the old is in a braking zone. So it might have great initial braking and no braking at middle to where you turn in. And so, we spent a lot of time running around looking at data and looking at video to show parts of the track that had grip and parts that had no grip. And that was the really daunting part of it, is that you really, without the experience and the knowledge of where to place the car, it's an extremely difficult challenge. You don't know where the puddles are, the rivers are, and you don't know where those surface changes are, and there's no runoff. So, all you can do is kind of just try to go and figure it out, but not make a mistake. But not making a mistake there is extremely difficult.
The concrete carousel, I'm sure, is real fun too in the wet. It'll just be like an ice rink. Just one quick question, but before that, how you said the weather could be different in different places. I mean, that was the problem this year. Is we were in the main sort of pit area on the GP track, and we were covered in fog. You couldn't see 3 feet in front of you. And there's people out on the Nordschleife who, it was a sunny day, and they probably couldn't understand why we're not restarting this race. But I was there all night and never had a break. It was crazy. It was like, I think the only time where the drivers and teams got to go to the hotel, and I stayed there, as opposed to I get to go to a hotel. Well, you guys are stuck running through the night.
The other way around.
Yeah. Is this the only track where you top out speed-wise with the Elantra N?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The long straight, we're topped out for quite a long time. And we carry that through a corner, and then we go through a compression where the front splitter will bottom a little bit, and then we carry it through a little chicane before we lift off to start braking. And it's just so what that track is. You think, oh, a really long straightaway that you're going to be maxed out. That's fine. You take that to a braking zone, no big deal. No, there's a little corner, and then there's a compression that bottoms the car, and then there's another couple little kinks before you actually get the car slowed down. And so there really is, no place to rest. And I think, I have this little Whoop band that I wear that tracks fitness, and it shows the activities. So when I'm driving, it'll track my heart rate. And I think the first few times I drove the car around there, I couldn't believe it. I thought, well, it must be broken. It can't be that high for that long. But it's just, there's so much going on. Like, and the tracks we drive here, I've driven for years. And so it's a little bit kind of just I just have a lot of knowledge of it, so I don't think twice about it. But at the Nurburgring, it's like you backpedal to your early days. You have to remember, factoring on all these things, all these variables, be it, code 60 zones, or where the flaggers are, or the 240,000 fans that were there having parties and light shows and barbecues and campfires, and all these things, add up to, you're still in fifth gear, flat out, going over a rise with a blind corner, and you have all these other things happening. And so it really brings you back to, you're hanging on tight, and you have to really coach yourself to relax, because there's just so much happening.
Yeah, no, I can't even imagine. I have enough trouble in city traffic sometimes.
Yeah.
So our final question, without disclosing exactly what it is, you and I are pretty close in age, and we both have a son that's the exact same age. And he was there hanging out with us, hanging out with me at times. How awesome was it having him there to see you win at the ring?
I mean, having Levi there was amazing. I mean, I knew when I found out I was going to get this opportunity, I said, Levi has to go. He'll appreciate it. It'll be such a cool experience. He's obviously never traveled to Europe before. And so for him, I'm not sure if he enjoyed the castle maybe more than the race, or the candy in the Hyundai and hospitality. But yeah, it was pretty cool at the end when we won, and he came up and he's like, you won. And it was just such a, again, like an unreal experience. So it's something I'm sure I'll remember forever, and hopefully he will too. But yeah, I mean, just an incredible experience for both of us, really. So grateful that was able to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll remember it for life. I mean, I took my son to F1 2 years ago when he was 6, and he still talks about it. So there's no way he'll forget that experience. Well, thank you a lot for coming on. We've taken up more of your time than we expected, but it's just a lot of fun chatting with you.
Hey, anytime.
Great I really hope I see you at the ring next year, that we're both back.
Well, we have to go back and repeat, right? We have to try to do it again, and maybe we get the full 24 hours. That would be
amazing. If I say I'm going to stay all night, the race is going to get suspended. So
yeah, well, I can't imagine. I don't know, knock on wood, but 2 years in a row to have that would be. I think it had been a few years since there had been a race almost that short. But you never know what you're going to get. That's the beauty of the Nurburgring.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks
so much, Mark.
Appreciate it.
All right, from one racing series to another, we have Colin Wood here to talk F1. A lot's happened last week. I guess we should start with the Canadian Grand Prix.
We should. There's finally something to talk about, because the past races were terrible. So I guess Formula One teased us. We had a couple bad races in a row, and then finally we got like a banger. It was everything. There was rain and mixed weather conditions and crashes and solid overtakes. And I mean, I guess, Max Verstappen winning is maybe not the most exciting thing in the world for some people, but I feel like he legit had to work for it. So,
oh yeah, he was challenged by Mercedes and McLaren, and it's great to see this new Mercedes front wing. Looks like they might be there, and it'll be, if it's an indication, and we have no idea if it is, though, we could have a very interesting rest of the season, because look where Perez qualified. And how much is it he just had bad luck, or how much is it Verstappen's so good? If that car is not as good as the other ones anymore, he can still do it. But
yeah, I get the feeling that, I mean, I don't know what's going on with Perez. I think there's something wrong there, but I think that there's a case here where like Verstappen he's the difference maker with that car. Like, I think if you put him in, I tend to believe right now, if you moved him to McLaren, he'd win a championship in a McLaren. If you moved him to Ferrari, he'd probably win a championship. Well, maybe not in a Ferrari. That was another surprise, right? Like, the Ferraris went from dominating in Monaco to just being terrible in Montreal. And I guess it's maybe more speed, because Monaco doesn't need as much speed, right? So that was shocking to see. And I think neither of them finished in the end. One of them, they had mechanical issues, and then science spun out, etc. So
yeah, I think that is it. Like, once you took away the Red Bull and the McLaren's top speed advantage, Ferrari could really shine at Monaco, and then here it came back. But it is interesting how the Canada Grand Prix always seems to deliver, at least in recent memory. And a part of it is the weather. It's like Nürburgring when I was there. It's like, you don't know when it's going to change. And I remember going 2 years ago in person, and it was freezing and pouring Saturday during qualifying. And that's when Alonso got, I don't know if he got pole or front row with Williams. That's who he was racing with back then. Yeah. And then the race day was sunny and bright,
wasn't he?
Or Alpine.
Yeah.
I can't remember. And then the race day was sunny and bright. It was just, it's just crazy.
It is always changeable, right? I think it must be funny too for people from other parts of the world of what they must think of Canada, of like, often the race gets like pouring rain and the weather looks miserable, and they're like, no, if you wait 6 hours, it's like, incredibly hot and humid, and it's actually a lovely day. So
yeah, it's on the calendar at the right spot, because if you did it in August, it'd be like just scorching humidity and no
Yeah.
rain. Whereas
Yeah.
when you get the spring changeover, you get the hot and cold fronts hitting each other.
I know.
While we're on the topic, reading the reports, it sounds like the organizers and the police need to have a little sit down and
I saw
figure out what
that.
happened.
So apparently they basically turned away. The police told people that FP1 and FP2 were canceled, and that was not true.
No, yeah, and they wouldn't even let them on subways. They wouldn't let them cross the bridge. And then during the race weekend, spectators were going to their usual spots, and then they started putting up screens like mesh so you couldn't see through. And apparently, like it's not just fans complaining. Like Liberty Media and F1 want to talk to them about it. So
yeah, it's a problem, which is weird. I think the event's normally very well run, so I don't know what happened this year, but
someone made the comment, and it could be true more or less. They're saying F1's so popular right now. It's outgrown that venue. Like that island can only hold so many people in so many places, and so many more want to be there. But it's like, where else are you gonna do the Canadian Grand Prix?
Yeah,
like I'd love it to go to Most Sport again, but there's have to be so many upgrades to that track. So.
There would be. What's the other track there in Montreal?
Mont Tremblant.
Mont Tremblant, yeah, like that was.
That's not really an F1. It's a great track, but I don't know.
Isn't that owned? I think that's owned by like one of the fashion designers or something right now. It's basically like a private racetrack. It's not private, but it's like a private racetrack for guys. So yeah, who knows, right? Maybe the Strolls can pave a whole new racetrack somewhere around here.
And there's a couple of those private country club styles out in BC too. So who knows? But anyway, moving on from that, what else do you have?
So maybe before we do, one of the interesting tidbits, and we talked about all this, gossip and rumors, was the craziness of Jacques Villeneuve and just dumping on Ricciardo hard. Right, he did not hold back, and like it seems a little
Paul Tracy.
Yeah, right, absolutely. He seems
those Canadian drivers.
He seemed a little mean, but I don't know. It was I think not unwarranted. Ricciardo has not been doing what sort of we thought he would do. And then Ricciardo came out and finished, I think it was 5th in qualifying or something, and then ended up finishing the race 8th. So he had that penalty for off the start, which probably would have moved him to maybe 7th. But maybe Ricciardo needs a little fire in the belly to get him going, right?
Yeah, like when he was at McLaren and things were going all wrong, and he finally got that win. So yeah, you never know. That could be how it is with him. I also think his team was behind at the start of the year, and it just seems everyone's kind of catching up right now. But you're right, when he came back, the whole thing was he's trying to earn the seat in Red Bull is what he kept saying. And then Perez signs multi-year, and it's like, well, that's not happening. So where do you go from here?
Yeah, and I'm so shocked with that. So, and interesting, the Red Bull news, it first came out that it was a 2-year, and now it's come out as it's a 1+1, right? So it's a 1 year with the ability to keep him for an extra one, and then the guy goes out, qualifies like 16th, and then properly, bins it in the wall during the race. So just usually you would think even there's no stress, like you can just drive how you want, like you got your new contract. Maybe he was trying too hard to show off. I don't know. Like it's just they always sort of mention Perez that maybe more psychological than anything else, which I guess at the height of motorsports probably is. So
I can't believe his car put him where it is, but maybe some of those complaints you always hear Max talking about are legitimate. They are. It's just he can overcome them. It's not him just like trying to say things. So who knows? But
yeah. Well, we'll find out. Maybe one of these years, Max will be, maybe he'll sign that insane deal at Mercedes, and we'll be like WTF, and that would be crazy. So,
George.
Yeah, right. So the other sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'd love to see Max and Lando because they're like such good buddies. That'd be like I think they'd have like the most competitive, friendly rivalry. Like they'd always try to one up each other. They're kind of doing it now on the track already in different teams.
Yeah, or they become mortal enemies as a result, right? It's
That's like that too. Yeah,
if you look at all the shenanigans of the the Hamilton and Rosberg era, right, when they were like driving each other off the track and stuff, it was very entertaining for the fans. I love that. So I was going to touch on the other trade rumors, etc. So some of the boring stuff. Yuki Tsunoda's back with RB for another year. Not terribly surprising. Apparently, the rumors that Jack Doohan, who's I think he's an F2 or he's reserved for Alpine, will actually take Ocon's seat because Ocon's out, and we don't know where he's going, if he's going anywhere.
Yeah, he's not having a good year at all. I mean, I know the team isn't, but him particularly.
Yeah, he's not. And I think Ocon, my understanding, what I've learned from Drive to Survive maybe is that he's not from money like a lot of the other guys. Like I'm not saying he's not broke, right? But he's not as wealthy as some of the other drivers, sort of his family isn't. So, he doesn't bring that other money to the table. So, sometimes that happens, right? Like, does he deserve to be in Formula One? He's certainly a top driver. He's a good driver, and not a top driver, but he's a good driver. But you could totally see him just disappearing and not coming back, and that.
Yeah.
So and then maybe sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, back to Tsunoda, I think he's like the most improved driver. Like this year compared to his other years, like he's always higher in his team. He's higher than he should be in places. Him and Albon, like, yeah, they've both been having good years.
Yeah. Tsunoda would be a guy who, like, you worry about those guys, right? Who, like, if you got them in a top car, they'd be much more impressive, right? Mm-hmm. And they may never get to, right? Like a Hülkenberg, who has sort of wallowed around, and there was apparently some rumor that he missed out on. It was one of like the Mercedes or McLaren seats back in the day when they were super good, and he just missed out on, like, they hired somebody else. And Hülkenberg could have a much more amazing resume than he does right now. But
poor guy.
Yeah, and then Ollie Bierman, he's apparently, the rumor is he's already signed with Haas. It's just not been announced. So I checked before I hopped on here. He is still currently, despite having raced just one race this year when he filled in for Carlos Sainz, he's still 13th overall in the standings. So
that's hilarious.
He's above, like, what is it, 8 other drivers, because I guess it's 21. So
there's legitimately going to be drivers who are going to race the entire season and not catch him in points, and that's such an interesting, if that's true, move, because you think, is that good for your career? You showed the pace you can have in a good car. Do you really want to, like, not flagging Haas too bad, but maybe it's better to sit out a year and wait for 26 with the new regs and, like, the new team structures and see if you can get somewhere? I don't know.
I know that's the same as, like, the Tsunodas and stuff. It's such a risk. You wind up at a mid-level team and you end up becoming a mid-level driver forever. And there's a difference between being a mid-level driver on a mid-level team and a mid-level driver on a top-level team, right? Like a Bottas, right? Bottas, like, he'll never be remembered in the history books as anybody fantastic. But if you go through and you look at, like, Wikipedia entries of winning drivers over there, and you're going to see a lot of, like, there's a lot of Bottas's mentioned in here. And it's because he was a good driver, solid driver at a world-class team. And
like Rubens Barrichello, like, he never won a championship. He was second tons of times, both Ferrari and then that one year at Braun. Yep. He has tons of wins, but it's like, you don't get that championship, people forget. But if there's no Schumacher, he would have won all those championships. That was it's just unfortunate for some guys. But the other thing is, you think, Bierman's going to Haas because they're unofficially sort of, they can develop for Ferrari, but you have Hamilton and Leclerc there. Like, there's nowhere, you're not getting there anytime soon. So
no, well, Hamilton,
unless Charles gets booed.
Hamilton can't stick around for too much longer. He's
sure.
We'll see. I figure I don't know I can't remember what the contract deal was, but I got to think it's at least 2 years. So we'll see.
Yeah, true. He won't be there long, but do you want to, like, what if you don't do anything for a couple of years? People are like, maybe not as good as we thought, when really it's your car. But
well, that's what Schumacher did when he came to the documentary on Schumacher is fantastic, and when he went to Ferrari, and I didn't even remember this when I watched it, is that he didn't win, I think, until his 3rd season with them, and people maybe it was even the 4th, at the end of, like, his last non-winning season, people were legitimately questioning, like, maybe he's not the guy, right? Could you imagine you're sitting there being like, maybe Schumacher won't be everything he's cracked up to be, and then fast forward all these years later, and it's like, he certainly was. So
I mean, circling back to Villeneuve, like that year when he tried to take him out to keep the lead and didn't, like, I could see there was a lot of doubts then, but little did we know the next couple of years.
It would be some Schumacher dominance. So
I'm sure you still have other bits and pieces, but we should probably get going. You can save it for next week.
I'll keep a juicy one in the pocket.
So we'll see you next week, and thanks for joining us again.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so taking a quick look ahead as to what's next. This week, I've been driving a Porsche Panamera 4, and I'll have a lot of details on that. It's been very interesting in many ways, but I don't want to spoil it, so we'll leave it there. Kyle, what have you been driving?
I have been driving the Chevrolet Blazer RS all-wheel drive. Oh wait, Blazer EV RS all-wheel drive. I should clarify. Very different vehicles. I also won't go into too much detail, but I will say that after last week, us driving the Cadillac Lyriq, which is on the same platform, but very different, it's been fascinating seeing the changes between the two. And it really, it's just more proof when people complain about, oh, all EVs, they're all just going to be the same. No, they're very not. And yeah, it's been strange. I think the most interesting thing, I will leave this one little tidbit. Chevy is bucking the trend with the Blazer because the all-wheel drive model actually has less power than the rear drive model, and less range, because that's pretty typical. But yeah, less power. So that's interesting.
Yep. So the next week we're both in town. No trips. I'm driving a car that I really like. Last time I drove it, and you not as much. So it got what I found the biggest issue updated this year. It's the Acura TLX Type S, and it was the infotainment system, and just basically all the controls were just not good and out of date. But that's all been changed this year, so maybe it'll be even more appealing, or maybe it won't leave as good of an impression, like the overall car. But we'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge really is we need to get you into a Genesis G70 back to back, and then maybe you'll see things my way.
I did get a good drive on a G70 recently, but it was the 4-cylinder.
Yeah. And then I am in a Range Rover, but not nearly the same Range Rover that you were in. It's the Land Rover Range Rover Velar, which I think completes my personal experience of driving all the different Range Rovers. So it's the mid-size model. I want to say it's only 2-row. I should figure that out. Yeah.
No, because you got Range Rover and then Sport, which is still 3-row available, but marginally smaller. It's like super full size. Yeah, and this is the mid, and then you got the Evoque that I think everyone forgets at the bottom.
Yeah, so I'm very interested because I think this is pretty related to the F-Pace, but obviously it has the very, very cool, very technical Land Rover design. And I'm just curious to drive it and see where it lands in the very crowded luxury SUV scene.
Yeah, I'll be interested to hear your impressions. Okay, so that's it, I guess, for this week. We've covered it all. This has been the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors, and next week we will have another special guest and a bunch of comparisons to talk about, and even more. So we'll see you then.
So long.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.